Okay, this will be One Piece live action Netflix series, episode 2 breakdown. The Man in the Straw Hat. Who's the man in the straw hat? Not me. That would be Barry. Barry is the man in the straw hat. But more importantly than the straw hat, I know, we have Buggy. And I know a lot of people are like, what could be more important than the straw hat? Buggy. Oh, right. Yeah, he is. He is. Okay, I want to see Buggy reach the One Piece first. Okay, hands up. Who wants to see Buggy reach Laugh Tale and find the One Piece first? Luffy will get it eventually, but I want to see Buggy get it first, just to bring that whole thing full circle. Oh my god, this episode is a blast. It really is. They changed. This is the part where I'm starting to like, yeah, they really did change a lot of stuff from the way the act was structured with the Orangetown arc, you know, but the changes that they made, I think, are perfectly acceptable, all right? Probably the biggest one a lot of people are going to bring up is the omission of Shushu or Chow Chow the dog. But I want to just stress at the beginning here. With these, every arc, there's a message that Oda is trying to extend, but with the East Blue, I feel like the messages are just to kind of learn about our main characters, because the East Blue is the first saga in the story, and the message that exists within Orangetown that we learn in the manga and the anime through Shushu, the dog, and the pet store and everything, is what exactly makes a treasure? Like, what is a treasure to someone? To a lot of pirates, treasure is merely gold and doubloons and pieces of 8, matey, you know? But to the Straw Hats, their treasures are a little different, okay? So I would say, as long as that message is still conveyed, there's other ways to do it beyond just having that specific scene with the dog and the pet store. That was a very clever way to utilize it. Also utilizing the legend of Hachiko, the dog that famously waited at the train station for his master to come home when he passed away while he was at work. So that, you know, that's a story that a lot of, like, especially children in Japan would know all about reading One Piece back when it was first serialized and everything like that. But I would say if the message is still conveyed exactly what makes a treasure to a particular person, it works, and that message is still conveyed. It is conveyed rather, instead of, you know, how Luffy and the dog have their treasure, it's conveyed through Luffy's treasure of the Straw Hat, as well as what Buggy views as a treasure, and his viewpoints and his goals, and we find a little bit about that in this episode that was not explained or not elaborated upon in the anime or in the manga until really recently. There's a scene in this episode where Buggy talks about directly going after the One Piece, and that's a scene that just happened in the manga recently, okay? So the idea, and it's like kind of the ultimate goal of every pirate, and part of the line from the manga is that Buggy realizes that, like, most pirates kind of give up on that dream relatively early on because just of how impossible it seems, and it makes sense why they would scorn or ridicule other pirates like Luffy for going after it. But at the end of the day, Buggy wants the One Piece. He wants the One Piece. He wants to be viewed as king of the pirates, okay? So, the beginning of this episode, this is going to be scattershotted as hell. These are all going to be. I was very pragmatic with the first episode because it was like the first time I'd ever seen the live action, and it was the day it came out, so I took a lot of notes. This one, I'm just going to go for it and see how it goes. All right, so the episode begins with Nami, Luffy, and Zoro sailing away on the ship that Nami stole from Buggy's crew, and they have the safe that they stole out of Morgan's office, and so Nami's on the deck of the ship trying to crack the safe, and Luffy's just goofing around. He's just being Luffy. He's just like, my goodness, I feel piratey. And it's like, yeah, that's how Luffy would be. If I've seen some people say that, like, man, Luffy's a little annoying, or, you know, it's like, Luffy would be annoying in real life because he'd be jumping up he would be doing this stuff. This is the kind of stuff I believe that Luffy would be doing, right? He'd be jumping around on deck being like, see the salty air. I love being a pirate. It's so glorious, isn't it, Nami? And Nami be like, chill out, dude. Go over there. I'm working, okay? That would be Luffy. There's a scene where his hat gets knocked away and he almost gets sent flying by the breeze. Nami kind of like shoos him away, just like, hey, get away, I'm working on this. And Luffy's like, hey, not cool, you know, don't touch the hat. Now, Something else that they have the advantage with here, they did not use all of the flashback from Luffy and Shanks' backstory in the first episode. Like in the manga, Romance Dawn covers that entire backstory. They split that up between episode 1 and 2 here, and it's really clever that they did that for, number one, to really bring home exactly what the Straw Hat means to Luffy, because the reveal of Shanks giving Luffy the Straw Hat, that's not shown in the live action until the end of this episode, when Shanks is departing Fuchsia Village. So there's kind of a parallel here. We're in the present of, like, Orangetown, and then we cut back to seeing Luffy, what's going on in his backstory with Shanks, okay? The whole thing with Higama and the Lord of the Coast and Shanks losing an arm, all that stuff in the bar fight, all that stuff happens here in this episode. That's also a great parallel because Buggy's here now, and Buggy and Shanks used to be on Goldie Roger's crew, and they used to know each other. So the idea that you're intersplicing this flashback of Shanks and Luffy while Buggy's also there in the present, that's actually a very clever way to change the story around to make it more fitting to, like, oh yeah, Buggy knows Shanks, and he was also kind of betrayed by him. We'll get to that as well. A lot of the stuff, honestly, does not become, like, fully known in the manga until very, very recently. Like, where, one of the chapters where Buggy actually talks about his relationship with Shanks and how he viewed him and how crushed he was when Shanks decided not to go after the One Piece right away after Roger's death. That was the betrayal, I guess, Buggy is talking about, and it's something we don't find out until way later that we're finding out here in the live action. So that's just an interesting way there. I'm curious exactly in the writing process of all this, you know, if Oda gave them any information for their characters, like if they asked about, like, a little bit about Buggy's character that we might not know about yet and Oda gave them anything. I'm not really sure how it would go down, but it all ended up working perfectly, okay? So Nami cracks the safe and they open it up, and inside the safe there's a couple of little Easter eggs. There's the main thing, which is the map to the Grand Line they're looking for. By the way, I completely forgot. It's been a while since I went back and reread, like, all of East Blue, and I completely forgot the map was even, like, a thing. You know, that's another thing too. It's like, you have to understand, like, One Piece is pretty high octane intense right now. Going back to the East Blue when it was simpler times, you know, I forgot, like, oh yeah, there was a map. That was, like, a thing, and they used it. It's different because the manga and the anime change it around a little bit, like, you know, where the map is or who has the map. I remember the anime added that whole extra scene of Nami breaking into the Marine base. Like, that happens in the anime, not in the manga. And she goes to steal the safe and get the map, and she breaks into the safe, but the map's already gone. Buggy already stole it. So we went from, in the manga, with Nami not breaking into the Marine base at all, to, in the anime, Nami breaking in and finding that the map had already been stolen by Buggy, to, in the live action, of the map still being in the safe and Buggy going after it with the Straw Hats getting it first, and then Buggy attacking them as they're leaving Shellstown. Three different ways to utilize that plot point, but I think all three are valid, okay? So they find the map. Also in the safe, you see a rolled-up wanted poster of Kuro. Makes sense why Morgan would have that in his safe, because that's, like, his greatest achievement. Like, you know, he said in the last episode even, you know, I was the one that single-handedly took in the Black Cat pirates. I'm the one that captured Kuro of 1,000 plans. You know, Morgan every night pours himself some whiskey, smokes a cigar, and just looks at Kuro's wanted poster like, you're the greatest achievement I've ever had, you know, which is funny considering what we'll get to, right? Also in there, I believe, is a Baroque Works calling card that was in there. It's very difficult to see, but it is in the corner. It is there. You see it. Artur, by the way, over at the Library of Ohara, made a whole video about all the Easter eggs, and my God, the level of attention that they paid. Like, there's stuff that like the Beasts of Baltimore matches that Zoro was lighting in the last episode. I caught that one. What I didn't catch, though, was all the alcohol was alcohol that were brands that exist in the One Piece world. Like, because there's various, like, you know, Straw Hats drinking alcohol on, like, you know, the cover pages, or you'll see it in the background, or the alcohol that was mentioned by Full Body at the Baratier. Like, it's very dry and sour taste. Those all have different brands of alcohol that Oda created, and they're all in the background of the episodes. It's crazy. Like, just a random bottle in the background or a keg over there. They got the names of restaurants correct. There was the name of the restaurant, the pub at Shellstown that Luffy and Kobe ate at, and it's such a little panel in the manga, like, that's the name of the restaurant. They made a lights, like a little, you know how, like, over pool tables they have those little lights that are like stained glass. in the last episode, you see that. You see the light with the name of the restaurant that was taken from like one panel of the manga. They paid attention to detail here in a level that was really, there's a box of shipbuilding tools that's like, Galley Law Company, because they make the best shipbuilding tools in the world, so obviously they would sell shit. It's like, that's in the background. Like, there's so much I missed. So go watch that video Artur made on all the different Easter eggs. There's so many of them. So they get into the safe, they find the map, and then, Luffy and Zoro are like, well, where's the Grand Line? Because they don't even know where it's at. And then Nami's like, do you not even understand geography? Geography is everything, sirs. And then she goes and draws a map of the world. And I love that. I love that line. I'm like, geography! Anytime geography shows up, they really paid attention to geography in this one too. The ending credits of every episode have the map, and by the way, an Easter egg is on the map. You even see the map of the Grand Line, or the map of the East Blue, commissioned by Commander-in-Chief Kong. So that's there. Kong's name dropped. But you also see like the map slowly adding to the East Blue as they're traveling. So last episode we had the Goa Kingdom, Sixus Island, Shellstown. Now we have the Organ Islands, specifically Orangetown, and that's added to the map at the end of the episode. And so like then the Syrup Village and the Gecko Islands will be added, and then the Baratier and the Sambasa region will be added. And I'm like, oh my god, they're paying attention to geography. God bless them. Okay. And that's not just my like geography is everything, haha, it's a meme on my channel. No, it's like geography is a very integral part to the One Piece world. The fact that they're paying attention to it, good attention to it, is monumental, all right? So Nami just basically draws a circle and like north, south, east, west blues. Here's the red line. Here's the Grand Line. Here you go, okay? Very simple for somebody just watching One Piece, just getting into the story of like, okay, so there's 4 blues, and then the red line is a giant strip of land, and then the Grand Line goes across it. Many astute viewers, if you've never watched One Piece before, if you don't know about anything about the property outside of the live action, they might mention like, oh, hey, wait, so there's a current of, it goes through the red line? How does that work? That'll be explained later. But anyway, so they talk about the One Piece now. They talk about how Luffy's like, oh, that's the Grand Line. That's where Roger hid his One Piece. I'm gonna find it, right? I'm gonna King of the Pirates. And Zoro is like, I've taken out a lot of pirates that were looking for that thing, the One Piece. What is it? Some kind of big diamond or something? And it's like, Zoro, you ruined it. It was a giant diamond the whole time. Damn it. But no, it's like, and Luffy's like, oh, it's the greatest treasure in the world. No one knows what it is. And Nami's like, yeah, it's a legend. It doesn't exist. And so this is like different perspectives on the One Piece. And she's like, it's been 22 years, Luffy. No one has found it. Somebody would have found the damn thing by now if it existed. No one has, so it's not real. And so they talk about, it's like, oh, okay, no, but, we're pirate crew, One Piece, we're gonna find it, right? So at this point, Buggy begins his attack. His ship begins to approach their ship, which I guess is Buggy's ship. Buggy is really just coming back to reclaim his ship that Nami stole. So can you really blame Buggy here? You really can't. They stole his ship. He's just trying to get it back. Also the map. So they fire buggy balls. Now the buggy balls are a little different in this. They are not just giant cannonballs that explode in massive flourish and flashiness, as it were. The buggy balls here are basically like sleeping gas, which I have to say, I love the original buggy ball and eventually the muggy ball and the tremendous amount of explosions and power it packs. But like, if we're going the line of Buggy being a clown pirate, so kind of Joker-inspired, having, like, sleeping gas, laughing gas as his principal weapon just kind of makes more sense, like some kind of gas weapon, because it's very Joker-esque. And Joker is, I'm going to assume, the most famous clown, villain in all of history, okay, in all of pop culture, okay? So the fact that the buggy balls are like giant gas, and it works, by the way, it knocks all the Straw Hats out. I mean, you can't lie if it's ineffective. It is effective, okay? So it, shoots the sleeping gas, and, Zoro's like, whoa, okay, and then Nami's like, and so they're all passing out. Before Luffy passes out, he has the wherewithal, he's like, gotta hide the map. And so this was actually kind of disgusting, but also kind of clever. Luffy takes the map, it's inside of a map roll, it's inside of like a container, like a metal container. He takes it, and he just shoves it down his throat. And he's made of rubber, so it's like, wait a second. I don't really remember Luffy doing that. I mean, it's a long story, so probably at some point Luffy has eaten an object and just kept it in his body. But, like, I don't remember any major moments where that happens, but yeah, of course he would be able to do that. He would just eat the thing, and his body, his organs would just shift around and bend and mold to whatever shape he's like. He wouldn't be able to eat anything. Luffy couldn't, like, eat a giant house or something. Well, maybe he could. Actually, he probably could. He would just be walking around with a giant house in his gut. But no, like a little tube that's like, I don't know, 2 feet long. He could just like, whoop, like, yeah, that he could do that. Sure, he could just mold his stomach around a little bit. It's like that. That's all it would take. Yeah, so he eats the map for safekeeping, and then they all lose consciousness, and Luffy kind of sees the sigil of the Jolly Roger of the Buggy pirates as they're approaching, okay? So they all pass out. They wake up inside of Buggy's tent. So in the original, the entire arc kind of took place all over Orangetown, the actual town. In this one, it's all principally just inside of Buggy's tent, all right, which is still fine. We actually do see Nami run out of the tent later, and she's in Orangetown, and we see it completely devastated, which that might be the implication that they use the Buggy Ball, because the houses are all completely demolished and smashed into splinters. So they probably use some heavy artillery, probably the Buggy Balls, to really destroy that place. But Nami runs out, sees it. She actually has like a little bit of PTSD war flashback from Kokoyashi of Arlong's crew wrecking her home village, and she's like, oh god, no, no, and then Buggy's crew like grabs her and drags her back into the tent. So pretty much the entire episode takes place in the tent, and like it's a big tent, and there's like different rooms. There's a green room in the tent. So they wake up and they're in like a box, and they're trying to like escape. You wake up and you find yourself in a box. It's like, all right, roll investigation, I guess. I don't know. So they start looking around and trying to escape and everything. And then they begin to talk about, like, where's the map at? And Luffy's just like, oh, don't worry, I got the map, don't worry about it. But he doesn't actually say where the map is or anything like that. But then it's revealed that the crate falls away, and it was, like, in the center of this tent. And there's just a massive, like carnival going around. Like, so we see Kabaji on the unicycle. We see Moji holding up, like, giant cards to an audience of captive citizens of Orangetown that are all, like, chained to the audience, like, the stands. And they're just like, yeah, this is great. Oh my god, it's like the carnival. Oh my god. Town is destroyed. They killed our animals. It's like that dog. I hope that dog's okay. The dog is okay. We see Shushu at the end of the episode. He makes a cameo. Don't worry, the dog's not dead. All right. We see Boodle there. Boodle's dressed up just like he is in the manga. He's chained up, and he's actually the one that's like, he's the mayor, so he's the one that's like Buggy's like torturing the most, because he's like, you're the mayor. That kind of stuff, right? So there's this massive carnival going on, and all of Buggy's crew are doing like various carnival acts, like fire breathing and like juggling and everything. We don't see Richie. That's actually pointed out later. And there's this funny scene where Luffy's there just watching this carnival out of nowhere, and he's just like, yeah, okay, this is great, this is awesome. And Luffy just starts clapping, and Nami's like, knock it off. Then Buggy walks in. Buggy makes his grand entrance, and played by Jeff Ward, and he walks in, and he's like, no, that's enough, you guys ruined the whole thing. Oh my god, first of all, where was the dancing lion? He goes over to Moji and he's like, where is my dancing lion? Richie's not in it. You see him later in a tapestry backstage. You kind of see a tapestry of the Buggy Pirates from the manga. You also see a tapestry of, like, Richie. So, I mean, like, okay, look. There's only 2 ways they could have done this, okay? If you're sad Richie's not in the episode. They could have just had an actual lion. Not a dancing lion, not a talking lion, not a juggling lion. They could have gotten an animal handler to bring a real lion in. And then there would just been a lion there, and maybe the lion could do some tricks or whatever, but it wouldn't have been a dancing lion. It would have just been a lion, and that would be it. That a lion that would be used for, like show business and stuff like that, right? They could have done that, or they could have CG'd a Richie. They could have CG'd Richie. And I don't think that would have worked out too well. I think that would have been very distracting if they CG'd a not talking. Well, Richie can kind of talk. Not really. He's more like Scooby-Doo, kind of. He's like, Roro. It's kind of like that. So you could have had a real lion just be there, and it might have not even done anything. It could have just been there and was like wearing a fancy outfit, like a little clown outfit. Or you could have had a CG lion. They decided to not go with either of those, and I'm okay with that. I'm fine with that. If you can't make it work, just make a joke about it. Richie's really not, like, that important to the Buggy Pirates. I mean, there is the fight with Moji and Richie and Luffy, but you don't need Richie. The fact you made the joke is fine. It's okay. So, also, Moji is officially in the manga the first mate of Buggy's crew. Did you always feel like Kabaji should have been? I always felt Kabaji was way cooler. I loved his hairstyle. I loved the unicycle. He's a swordsman and stuff. And we get way more of Kabaji. Moji is more of like a background character. He's kind of just there holding up the cue cards, like laugh, and the audience is like, ah! They like laugh very, because they're under duress. That's basically all Moji does. And Kabaji, though, actually has a decent number of lines, and he's actually has a moment with Zoro where we find out some backstory about his character that we never knew about before. So I actually really like that. But he walks out Buggy, and he's just like, my spotlight was off, and he begins to introduce himself, and Luffy looks at him, and he's like, well, wait a second, I know you. I saw your wanted poster at Shellstown. You're Binky, right? And so that's a running gag from the manga that I think translates pretty well to live action. It's Luffy can never get anybody's name right or always forget somebody's name, and this works. This is fine. That's a perfectly okay joke to translate to live action, and it works. Binky, right? And he's like, Buggy the clown, Buggy the flashy fool, Buggy the genius jester, come on! And nobody else in the world calls him by those titles, but he's just rattling them all off. I love the fact they included genius jester. That was the one, because that was one that shows up a little later. I don't think they called him the genius jester back in the day. Maybe they did, but like, the genius jester is like when Buggy, what he's at right now in the story, and he's rise to fame, that's when he gets the title of genius jester, which is fantastic. Okay, they use that here as like a little Easter egg. So he begins to like announce himself of who he is, and he's looking for his map, and they're not telling him. Although Luffy does have a thing at a moment where he's like, wow, you have a lot of names. I bet everybody in the East Blue knows who you are. And he's like, nose? Are you making fun of my nose? And they have that, and there's even a joke that's kind of like ambiguous on whether the nose is real or not when he like grabs Luffy's face like, are you making fun of my nose? And Luffy's like, actually I wasn't, but now is that thing real? And Buggy like just tosses him away and stuff, right? Now Nami makes a play at this point where she's like, hey Buggy, guess what? I have a new freak for your circus, and like knocks Luffy's hat off. Luffy stretches up to grab it, and Buggy's like, oh, okay, yeah, all right, I can work with this. And that's when Nami tries to run out of the tent into the town, and she sees it completely destroyed, and she like has a panic attack, and then they drag her back in. So they're like, okay, Zoro. And they took Zoro's swords, by the way. They're not going to leave him in the cage with a bunch of swords. So they're like, okay, Zoro and Nami, you guys wait in the green room, tie him up, lock him up. I have some words to say to this rubber boy or whatever. Okay, so Luffy's going to stay behind and get interrogated by Buggy while Nami and Zoro are taken away. So Nami gets thrown into a cage, and Zoro is tied to a giant wheel, like you would see in a circus with like the knife throwers and stuff. I'll just talk about those scenes now. So there is a nice little scene where Nami pulls out a lockpick, and Zoro's like, oh, you have a lockpick, and Nami's like, I have 4 lockpicks. The clown's only found 3 of them. And just like, okay, that was a nice line. I like that, because Nami is always prepared for any situation. Okay, so she's starting to pick the lock on the cage, and then Kabaji walks in and looks at Zoro like tied to this wheel of death. And Kabaji, his backstory in the live action is actually pretty interesting. He mentions that he's like, you remember me, don't you? And Zoro's like, no. And just like, you hunted us, me and my brother, across the swamplands of the Goa Kingdom, relentless for days like some kind of demon. You cut off my brother's head and shoved it into a sack just for some berry. And then Zoro's like, yeah, that sounds like me. I'm just like, okay. So, a couple of things to dissect here with this. Number one, we're getting more backstory with Zoro being a bounty hunter. Zoro was a relentless bounty hunter. He was called the Pirate Hunter. He was called a demon. People would talk about, like, the way Kobe talked about him in the manga was like, no, Zoro, he's scary, and we didn't really explore too much of that when we met Zoro in the manga. It was just like, oh, Zoro's an okay guy. No, this is like, no, there were moments where Zoro was hunting pirates. Those pirates thought of Zoro as, like, Satan chasing them. them, okay? Like, wouldn't you? It's like Zoro needs a bounty, Kabaji's brother, and he's chasing them all through the swamplands of Goa. That expands on geography. The Goa Kingdom is huge, and we see that there's like a big island region. I think it's called the Yotsuba Island region, and you see Goa, you see the Fuchsia village where Luffy grew up is like the edge of the Goa Kingdom. You see Mount Kolbo there, but like that's just one side of the island. Like here's the Goa Kingdom, here's Mount Kolbo, Great Terminal's here, then you see Fuchsia over here. You got a whole other island over here though. So the swamplands of Goa. Okay, there's a swampland in the same area there somewhere in the woods, and then Zoro hunted Kabaji and his brother and killed his brother, and so Kabaji's kind of out for revenge. We don't get the name of his brother or anything like that, but I thought that was cool. I thought that worked, and like I said, I like Kabaji, honestly. So he's like, you know, I'm gonna torment you, and I'm gonna watch you squirm like you made us squirm. And so he spins the wheel of death and takes out his knives and starts chucking them at the wheels. So we don't get the unicycle sword fight with Zoro and Kabaji, which would have been fairly difficult to shoot, so we're doing this instead. Now, this ultimately results in Zoro being freed. You could even I could see what's going on. Like, oh, okay, he's gonna throw the knives or the daggers. They're gonna hit the rope. Zoro's gonna break free. You know, that's gonna happen. And then Nami's gonna pick her lock, and it's like whatever. But I like the extra backstory for Kabaji. I thought it fit very well. So then we have Luffy being interrogated by Buggy, and this is a fairly difficult thing to do because Luffy is, you know, a rubber man. So Buggy just attaches him to, like, well, you know those things, I forget what they're called, the draw and quartering things, where you would be tied like the rope and drawn and quartered, and your limbs would be pulled off by oxen or some, you know, like some device or something. So they kind of have Luffy hooked up to that, and he's being stretched across the entire tent. So it's really cool. So you have the main area of the tent where you're performing, and you have Luffy like there, like suspended with both legs and both arms tied up and being stretched. And Luffy's just like, I can do this all day. Now, Luffy does have a maximum limit of stretching, but from what we're going to see later in the episode, they are going to change some stuff about Devil Fruit powers, okay? We also had a scene with Luffy and Makino at the beginning that's like a flashback where Makino explains not a lot about Devil Fruits, because keep in mind, Devil Fruits are not well known in the East. They're kind of like just folklore and legend. So Makino tells Luffy, like, you know, no two are the same, and whoever eats one is hated by Mother Ocean, okay, and will like drag you down. So that's like the general folklore that like every citizen in the One Piece world knows about Devil Fruits, but not everybody is experienced in them fully, okay? So Makino is going to know some folklore, but that's it. So I like that scene because that's how Luffy learned about, like, oh, okay, so he can't swim, and also, you know, there's no two are the same because we're going to get set up to see Buggy's fruit here in a moment. So, he's being stretched, and he's not really, like, Luffy doesn't care. You know, he's just like, I could do this all day. And then Buggy's just like, okay, all right. Stretch him 10 more feet. And then Boodle is the mayor. He's the one that's just like, oh, please, don't let me do this. All right. Oh, I'm sorry, kid. And Luffy's like, nah, it's cool. I'm good. And so Buggy's like, all right. I'm trying to interrogate you to get this map. This isn't working. I need to get you out of your comfort zone. Okay, why does a rubber kid from Nowheresville want to be king of the pirates? You know, why do you want to do that? To, like, impress a lost love or a parent? I would have loved, I was kind of waiting for a scene there where Luffy was like, nah, I don't know my parents. Like, I don't know my parents. Like, little hint at dragon, maybe. I don't know. He's like, or, you know, somebody to look up to, you know, someone like that. And so that's Shanks. And then that gets Luffy to talk about Shanks a little bit. And, well, really, Buggy notices the Straw Hat and notices it is. And at that point, that's when Buggy kind of recognizes the Straw Hat. He knows it's Shanks' Straw Hat. And so it's like, you know, I used to know a pirate that wore a hat just like yours. You know, we were apprentices on a ship way back in the day when probably we were about your age, actually. And then he betrayed me like everybody else. And so that gets Luffy. Luffy mentions Shanks by name, and so Shanks is like, oh, okay, you know him. All right, well, did he leave you and abandon you and betray you just like he did me? And then that's kind of the catalyst for the flashback, okay? So we'll just get to that now. So we have the remainder of the flashback. We get a couple scenes where Luffy's practicing with his Devil Fruit power. That's at the beginning with Makino, where he's trying to hit a bottle with pistol, and he keeps breaking chairs in the bar or whatever. We have a scene where Higama comes back into the bar, right? And he's like, well, Shanks tells Luffy first that, like, hey, we're not coming back. We're stocking up and then we're leaving. And then Luffy's kind of dejected and upset. And then Higuma walks into the bar when it's just him and Makino, Luffy and Makino. And Higuma's like, I want my drink, wench. You know, something like that. Luffy shouts at him and screams, like, you get away. And then Higuma, like, grabs Luffy. And then that's when Shanks and the crew all get involved. That's when the bets are off moment. And Lucky Roo shoots one of the pirates. There's this really fun scene where it's just Shanks initially in the bar, and then he just kind of points his fingers at one of the bandits and does this, and then Lucky Roo's way in the background, and he fires a shot and cracks them right in the face. It's like, oh my god, does Shanks have psychic powers and just shot somebody? Is this Inuyashiki? What is this? And no. So then it begins, like, the brawl with the red-haired pirates. So we see Yasop and Ben Beckman. By the way, Ben Beckman. So I've been seeing some memes around Ben Beckman and his actor, and, like, that was one of the acting choices, the casting choices that people aren't super on board with. When I first saw the actor playing Ben Beckman, I did think, like, oh, he looks a little old to be playing Ben Beckman. This actor looks to be, like, about in his 40s or 50s. I always assumed Ben Beckman at, you know, East Blue, which was, keep in mind, 10 years before the start of the story. I always assumed Ben Beckman was, like, in his mid-20s. I thought he was, like, the same age as Shanks, really. I looked it up. Ben Beckman is almost 40. In the flashback, he's like 38, and right now he's like 50. I think he's 50 years old exactly right now. So that actually is like, oh, okay, that makes more sense, because I was a little bit like, oh, Ben Beckman, the actor playing him, is like a little older than I thought that Ben Beckman would be. But, like, honestly, no. I mean, Ben Beckman's like 50 right now, okay? And he's like 40 back then almost. He's like 38, 39 years old. So I think the age for the actor actually is kind of appropriate right now, so there's that. But we have this really badass scene where Lucky Roo and Yasop and Ben Beckman are just beating the shit out of these bandits. There's a scene where Yasop is like, he has his guns, right? And then Lucky Roo is fighting one of the bandits, and one of the bandits kind of grabs Lucky Roo, so he's like strangling him like this, putting him in a headlock, and Yasop pulls out his flintlock, and he looks at him, and he's just like, okay, I can't shoot. I might hit Lucky Roo if I shoot him. So he just looks over and sees a metal post and just shoots, ricochets the bullet off the metal post, hits the bandit right in the head, falls off Lucky Roo. Like, that was a bomb shot. That was awesome. By the way, the entire time this is going on, Ben Beckman's, like, smacking shit with his rifle, and Yasop's knocking people away, shooting people with his pistols. And then Lucky Roo just has a piece of mutton that he's just beating people over the head with. That was a good scene. We see Ben Beckman fire his rifle, which is something that we very rarely get to see. Ben Beckman usually just, like, clubs people over the head with it. But there's just this, it's a little cheesy where they just, like, they cock their guns at the same time, like, it's like, get some, and they all fire at the same time. So it's like Ben Beckman fires his rifle, not even aiming it, just like, boom, and then Yasop is like, bang, both times, like 3 shots at once, like, get some, and I'm like, all right, that was awesome. I don't get. And then Lucky Roo's off to the side, like, beating people over the side with a piece of mutton. I was like, all right, that's how Shanks' crew rolls. And then Shanks knocks some bandits over, and he's like, wait a second, where's Luffy? And then we have the scene with Higuma taking Luffy. Dude, I'll tell you what. We even get some character development from Higuma, of all people. Like, do you care? I mean, I care. I mean, more character development is better than none, right? There's a scene when they're in the boat and Higuma's, like, getting Luffy out of the town, and he's, like, you know, holding him as hostage. Shanks is gonna make you butter on bread or something like that. You know, you're gonna wish you were never born. And Higuma's like, trust me, kid. I already believe that already. I've thought that my whole life. You know, so it's like, okay, it's a little bit like Higuma's had a rough life, and he's like, trust me, kid, I already wish I wasn't born. You know, it's just like, okay, it's not much, but it's something. It's more than just the rather one-dimensional character he had in the manga that was just like, I'm a bandit and I stab things. Here it's like, all right, he's had a rough life. Higuma's had a rough life to get where he is. Anyway, Lord of the Coast comes out and eats him. We all know how that goes. Shanks shows up, saves Luffy. Lord of the Coast eats, chomps down on Shanks' arm, and then Shanks uses Conquerors. He's like, get lost. We see the zoom in. So the way they do Conquerors, they just zoom into Shanks' eye, and then you see the ripple effect and the ping of just like, boom, and then you see the Lord of the Coast's eye, which, by the way, the CG effect on the Lord of the Coast and his eye is cool. It has like that fish reptile thing where there's like an extra like eyelid You can see that kind of animated there in the CG, and then you see the pupil kind of go large in the Lord of the Coast, and he's just like, and then he just like falls away. I thought it worked fine. It's gonna be a while until like hockey is actually a mainline part of the story, so just that's kind of like how it's done in the manga. Shanks just kind of looks at him menacingly, and then he runs away, right? And so that's that there. So Luffy sees that Shanks is missing an arm, and he begins to cry, and Shanks is just like, it's just an arm, Luffy, it's okay. You know, a lot of these really emotional scenes in the show, and this goes for other episodes as well, especially like the Mihawk versus Zoro fight we'll get to. A lot of the stuff they kept like word verbatim in the manga as much as they could for time and brevity's sake, but they keep the moment pretty well like the same as it is in the manga there, with Shanks in the boat getting his arm bit off, and it's like, it's just an arm, Luffy, it's okay, as long as you're safe, that's all that matters, right? It's like, oh, Shanks, I'm sorry. It's like, it's okay. There's a moment with Boodle. This is where we find out where Buggy's ability is. Okay, so Buggy's like, stretch him more, and Boodle's like, please don't make me do this, he's just a kid. And Buggy's like, oh, I was so generous to allow you all, your townsfolk, to join my circus and watch my people perform, and this is how you repay me. Would you rather put one of your townsfolk, your constituents up here instead? Okay. And so he goes over and finds a kid in the crowd, and Buggy is so creepy here. He's just like, hey, kid, you want to get tall fast? Like, Chef Ward is great at this. And so he has this kid there, and Luffy's still all tied up, and he's like, Boogie, put him down. Boogie was the original name of Buggy. His name was supposed to be Boogie originally. The reason Oda changed it was because there was a character in Nightmare Before Christmas named Mr. Boogie, and I don't think there was a copyright thing. I think maybe just Oda was like, oh, that was just used. Because that was like when, Oda was coming up with One Piece and Buggy's character. This was the same time Nightmare Before Christmas came out in like the late 90s, Tim Burton movie. So, no, the other Nightmare Before Christmas, the non-Tim Burton version. Yeah, no. So that's the reasons. That's a little Easter egg there. And so Luffy kind of like, oh, put him down, Boogie, and he's like, it's Buggy, and Luffy's like, and so he kind of like breaks out of the rope. He just kind of like pulls hard enough, and his wrists and everything are made of rubber. They're not gonna break. He just slip right through it. So he breaks out and he lands, and Buggy's just like, oh, and then Luffy's like, gum pistol. He uses pistol, punches Buggy right in the head. His head flies off into the crowd. There's a scene where when Luffy retracts his arm, he looks at his I just decapitated. How strong am I? I was pissed off. Jeez. And so then you get the reveal of the chop fruit, where Buggy's head lands on like a random towns member in the crowd, random citizen, and just like flips around, just like, hi, how you doing? And there's like, ah! It's like, well. And then the head flies back on the body, just like, looks like we got something else in common. And Luffy's like, you ate a devil fruit? He's like, yeah, the chop fruit. And this is a great moment. This is a great scene, okay? So the effects of this work well. There's not a lot of other devil fruits in the East Blue. In fact, there's not, because we don't get to Smoker until like a post scene at the very end of the series, at the end of the season. So this is the only devil fruits we really have to work with here, but they're going to get crazier as we go. But this one, it's one of the easier ones to do, honestly. You just have to separate Buggy's body with CG, and it's pretty seamless. So they don't do, obviously, like when Buggy like separates his arm, the part that you can see, it's just flesh. It's not like blood or gore or muscle, so that keeps it true to the manga and the anime, because like if they did it realistically, there'd be so much gore. You just see Buggy's like muscle and bone in there. The way they do the costumes, if you noticed, so Buggy has, and this is his outfit in the manga too. It's not like they changed it. Buggy has like a little kerchief, like a little scarf around his neck. Well, that's practical too, because when Buggy's head is separated, that scarf is kind of covering the neck. So I think it just makes it easier for the CG artists to do what they're doing to separate the head. There's also, when Buggy is revealing his power, he's wearing like a cloak. And so after his head reattaches, he kind of like throws the kid back in the audience, and he's just like, yeah, I ate the chop fruit. And he begins to take off his cloak. So he just has like this vest, and the vest ends right there. So that provides like a seam for, the attachment, just to make it less. And by the end of the episode, Buggy is separating all of his body parts, so they're all over the place. But this just makes it like easier for like, so it's just like very obvious, like, how to explain it, like big gaps of like flesh where they are, like to make it less distracting, I guess. It works is the point. So he's like, yeah, I ate the chop fruit, so you can slice me and you can dice me, but I'll always put myself back together again. And he just, you know, separates his arms and his legs and pops them all back together. Okay, so in the way that his ability works, but I've always felt like it could do this as well. So it's kind of an inverse of Luffy's ability a little bit in terms of weaknesses. So Luffy's Gamu Gamu no Mi. He's immune to blunt attacks because he's made of rubber, but piercing and slashing and stabbing attacks can still hurt him. Buggy is immune to slashing and piercing damage because he can separate his body, but he can take damage from bludgeoning attacks like Luffy's punch. But he can also separate his body at will. So you'd think if Buggy's about to be punched, as soon as the punch happens, he'll just detach his head, and then using like just the inertia of that, it'll fly away, and he can make his body float. So yeah, he would still take damage from that punch, but it would be mitigated by the fact that he could just separate his head as the punch is happening, and he could just fly his head away. All right, so he kind of is immune to bludgeoning damage, just depending on if you just get hits in the stomach later, he could just have part of his stomach just pop out and then pop back in. So there you go, right? He's a chop man. So he does that. He's introducing his power to Luffy, and Luffy's just like, what is this guy? And then he's like, you want to know something else I can do? And he raises up his arm, and like his hand is missing, and he's like, oh. And then you just turn around, and like the hand moved behind Luffy, crushes another smoke ball, and then knocks him in the face and knocks him out. So Luffy wakes up. This is another big change that they did with the devil fruit weaknesses. Luffy wakes up, and he's in a tank. Okay, and the tank is being filled with water, like in a circus, like some Harry Houdini shit, right? And Buggy's there, and he's just like, oh, don't bother, it's seawater. Okay, I understand why they made this one. I understand why they made this change, okay? I think they're just going to keep it simple in the live action. It's seawater that affects devil fruit users. When seawater is up to a certain point, the more water you're submerged in, it weakens you. Okay, I don't know. There's implication that when the seawater is even drizzling on Luffy, like it's actually like pouring over Luffy, he's weakened just from that. They might change it that way too. They might just make it so seawater in general weakens devil fruit users. So if they're submerged in seawater, that weakens them. If you take a big bucket of seawater and splash it on them, they might feel a little bit like, oh, for a little bit there. In the manga, the way it works is it can be any liquid. It doesn't have to be seawater. Although I can see the reason they made this change makes sense, because it's like devil fruit users are hated by the sea. Just make it seawater. Seawater is the thing that actually weakens them, okay? In the manga and the anime, it can be like fresh water, it can be juice, it can be soda. If Luffy was submerged in anything, he would be weakened. They might still keep it like that. Maybe Buggy was just like, oh, it's seawater. That's like, I've always been weak to seawater, so whatever. But I don't know. I don't know how they're going to change it. But if they do just change it to make it seawater, at least it makes it simpler to the first-time viewers of like, oh, they're weak to seawater and they can't swim. Okay, it makes more sense than explaining like any type of liquid they can be submerged in and it weakens them, and running water is okay, like rain doesn't weaken them or anything like that. So, you know, just keeping it seawater. I always get comments on my channel, like whenever I say like freshwater weakens devil fruit users, I always get comments that are like, you know, but it's not seawater. I thought it's only seawater. I'm like, no, it's not. Oda says this. It's an SBS. And so this is just going to perpetuate that probably, but whatever. It's a different medium. I'll be okay with it. That's fine. So Luffy's in a tank as Buggy is still trying to get the map out of him, and Luffy's just refusing to give it to him. Meanwhile, so we did the flashbacks. Oh, let's do the scenes with Kobe, Garp, and Bogard. So there's scenes, we cut back to Shell's Town, where Garp and Bogard arrive because the base was just attacked by pirates. Morgan is still in charge at this point. He didn't get court-martialed or anything or get thrown in the brig or something, okay? Morgan is still there. Garp meets him, talks to him a little bit. And then he gets introduced to the cadets. So you see Helmeppo there, who has the haircut, and he's there, and he's a cadet. He has the black eye, and he's just like, yes, sir. And then you also have Kobe there, who's wearing the Marine uniform as a cadet. They're not shore boys. They're cadets in this one. So they're actually enlisted soldiers, beginning their Marine, journey and all that. And so Garp kind of looks over at Kobe, and he's just like, a new recruit right after. right after these pirates attack, this kid just joins up. Interesting. Okay. And like the same day. It's like, oh, okay. So people have said Garp is a little bit more analytical in this one. He's a little bit more like a detective. And I'm fine with that. I really am, because, you know, this does make a little bit like, okay, wait a minute. And so he calls Kobe into his office, into Morgan's office. You see the Den Den Mushy. Bogart is there and everything. And it's like, wait a second, okay, so people saw you with the guy that attacked this base, a pirate with a straw hat. You know, they saw you in the pub having a meal, so what's going on? How long have you been working with pirates? And Kobe's just like, no, I haven't. He's like, you gotta be honest with me, lad. You know, and just like, okay, well, I was captured by Alvida, and she was really mean, and then Luffy saved me, and he says his name is Luffy, and then Garp immediately, of course, Garp doesn't say to Kobe, that's my grandson, but he says, like, Luffy. All right. And so this kind of is going to begin the little side plot between Garp. So Garp is going to have a lot more involvement in Season 1 because he has, like, none in the actual manga. He doesn't even show up until a cover story near the end of the East Blue in the manga. So introducing Garp earlier and having scenes with him going after Luffy and kind of, like, teaching him that the Grand Line is really dangerous and you're maybe not ready for this. And at the end of the day, Garp does not want Luffy to be a pirate, so he's going to try to stop him, okay? Now, the twist that most people watching this wouldn't know initially is, like, Garp is Luffy's grandfather. You wouldn't know that right away. This is found out later in, like, episode 5, I think you find that out. And, like, Garp actually reveals it, and Luffy reveals it as well. So they're doing this a lot earlier than in the manga, but once again, I don't see that as a bad thing. I don't see this as a bad thing of, like, Garp being more analytical. He is a Marine after all. He's not all just going to be like, give me donuts! Oh, no. All right, I sleep now. All right, now let's go. You know, that's you know, having him being a little bit more intelligent, and just not even like he's not intelligent in the manga, but just being a little bit more serious, like he is a Marine. But he also has this jovialness about him as well. We're going to see that in later episodes between him and Kobe. We're going to get a lot more character development from Garp and Kobe in this season, which I'm perfectly fine with. Other than Kobe just disappearing after the first episode and not seeing him again in the entire season, having his story play out through the season, I think that kind of works. I'm fine with that, right? So Garp interrogates Kobe, and Kobe's being truthful with him, and Garp asks him the question of, like, well, is this person your friend? Is this Luffy a friend of yours? He's a pirate after all. What would you do? And Kobe says, well, all pirates need to be captured and brought to justice. And Garp is like, fine answer, son. What do you think, Bogart? And Bogart is like, I think it was a very honest answer. Honesty is a virtue of a Marine after all. And I don't think it's a virtue that's very much used in this Marine base, implying that Morgan has been lying to them and is a blowhard and it should probably rather be court-martialed here, okay? So that's going to set up for something we see at the end. I'll just cut to it here. It has the scene at the end where Garp walks out into the yard at Shellstown, and we find Morgan on the cross in the yard. And so it's just like, you know, we need to crush not only pirates but their dreams, and there's people, keep in mind that, you know, even the Marines, you know, sometimes there could be people that are untrustworthy and cruel, so you got to keep an eye out for that as well. And Garp says, I'm going to take an entire group of these new recruits with me, and we're going to go capture the pirate that attacked this base. So this is Garp being like, I'm going to go find my dumbass grandson, and I'm going to show him what the world is really like. If he wants to be a pirate, he's got to do it over my dead body first, okay? So this is going to all come to a head in the finale, but for right now, this is setting it up, okay? So we'll see how this goes throughout the story and how it kind of clicks up with major story events that have been altered for the sake of including Garp, okay? So we'll see that. All right. So, I think with that being said, I think we can pretty much cut to the end of the episode. The end of the episode is great. The final battle with Buggy here. So, Luffy's still in the tank. Zoro, you know, he's on the Wheel of Death. The knives hit him. He breaks free. He defeats Kabaji. Nami breaks free as well. She has her staff. Zoro has his swords back. They kind of defeat all the rest of Buggy's crew off camera, like Moji and the other random members. They're just defeated, and so they just walk out, Zoro and Nami, and are just like, oh, your crew's not coming. Like, where are my freaks? I'm like, they're not coming. It's like, oh, no! Nami throws her staff, breaks the water tank that Luffy's in frees him. His hat flies off. So Buggy goes after the, when Luffy falls, he spits up the map. So Buggy goes after the map, Luffy goes after his hat. And that's right there is the message between the treasure. The scene where Buggy stabs the hat, that happens as well earlier on in the episode, where Luffy's hat gets stabbed by the knives and Luffy gets upset over that. That all still happens, okay? So Luffy goes for a hat, he's like, my hat, and he's like, my map, I finally have it. So Luffy's on the ground still trying to catch his breath a little bit after being drowned and weakened by the seawater, and then it's Zoro and Nami versus Buggy. And this is a great scene. I probably watched this scene the most out of the whole series, where Zoro goes up to Buggy, doesn't know his devil fruit power yet. Zoro goes up to Buggy and is just like, I'm just gonna cut you up. And he's just like, show me what you got. Come on, buddy. And then so Zoro slices his head. Buggy just pops the head off, pops it back on. Zoro slices up his chest, cuts him even more. And then Buggy's just like, surprise, shithead! That's such a Buggy thing to say. Surprise, shithead! And then he separates his whole body, and then the music's playing in the background, like dun-dun-dun-dun-dun-dun-dun-dun-dun-dun, like the demented circus music is going full power here. Buggy separates his whole body, whirling it around the whole area, and then so Zoro's just like, how do I cut somebody that I can't? And then they're fighting. So they do change Buggy's ability a bit. In the manga, he has to keep his feet on the ground at all time to have this, like, perimeter of, like, keeping his body parts flying around. In this one, he can make his whole body float. So even his legs. So even his feet come up and, like, strike Zoro, and Zoro's, like, blocking it with his swords. He gets knocked into the tank, and he gets shoved over. He falls down over the tank. Nami gets knocked over. Gets, like, gut punched by one of the Buggy's fists. And so Buggy's like, ha 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 ha! And so Luffy finally gets back up, and Zoro and Nami, they're all kind of down, and Luffy gets starting to get strangled by Buggy's hand, and he's just like, you can't stop me, I can defeat you, I'm gonna find the One Piece, I'm gonna be king of the pirates, and all that jazz. That's when Luffy looks over, and he sees a bunch of empty crates. Now, in the manga, the way this worked was, in the middle of an attack, Nami just grabs Buggy's body and ties it up. Would probably not work in this, honestly, because can't Buggy he could just separate his body at will in this. In the manga, it was kind of intentional, like, whenever Buggy gets cut, that's when he separates his body, but he can separate his body at will. So being tied up really wouldn't do much to him, you know what I mean? He's tied up. As long as he can separate his whole body, he's fine. There's even a scene where his head is separated from his body later, and his body is tied up at Arlong Park, and once his head rejoins, he could separate his body and rejoin everything. It's not a big deal for him, okay? So tying him up wouldn't really make much sense with what we've seen with his powers, okay? So instead, there are these big empty crates and barrels and boxes off to the side of the circus, and so Luffy frees himself of his hand, and he's just like, Nami, the crates, and then they just start knocking all of Buggy's body parts into these crates and shutting them. And does it work? I think it does, because, like, in the manga, it was just like Buggy was so stupid and oblivious, he could not notice Nami just grabbing his body and tying it up in the background. All right? This one, it's like, oh shit, they're grabbing my body parts and locking them in cages. I can't, oh, that's not good. So they do that, lock up his body parts, and Buggy is reduced the way he is in the manga, just a head, two feet, and 2 hands, and that's it. And he's just like, I'll get you for this. You'll never be a king of the pirates. You're just a lonely, sad boy with somebody else's hat. And then Luffy finishes him off using Gamu Gamu no Bazooka, knocks him clear out of the tent, and saves the day. There is a moment where Zoro and Nami just getting ready to leave. They're like, let's get the fuck out of here. Let's get done with this stupid-ass circus. But then Luffy's like, wait, there's still something we need to do. And they're like, what? And then Luffy goes and turns the lights on in the tent and then begins to free all of the townspeople. And Boodle, the town mayor, is there, and he's like, wait, so are you capturing us now? Or is like, well, how's this work? And Luffy's just like, no, you're free. I'm letting you go. And he's just like, oh, well, I thought you were pirates and all. And he's just like, I'm a different kind of pirate. And Boodle's like, huh, okay. And whatever, fine. We get freed. We don't care. We don't have to stick around and laugh and clap at this stupid circus anymore. So at the end of the episode, the townsfolk kind of approach Luffy with like a box of like, hey, we don't have much. They kind of destroyed our whole town, but we did manage to find some food and some provisions for your journey. That's the best we have. We also see Shoo Shoo there, little puppy dog. He's walking over, and he's just like, oh, there's the dog. Okay. And Luffy at first is like, oh, no, you would need it more than I do, and they're about to leave. But then Luffy comes back and just grabs a piece of bread or something coming out of the box, and he's just like, I'll take this, actually, thank you. He's like, all right, take care now. And that was a good little scene. They minimized the townsfolk, but hey, Boodle is still Boodle. He has the same outfit. The dog was still there. They had to fit everything down into Buggy's tent, but I think the overall message of the episode is still fair. It's still good. So the last scene of the episode we have, as Nami and everybody are sailing away, Nami fixes Luffy's straw hat, of course, stitches it back up, and is like, thank you so much. And Nami's like, well, you did say it was your treasure, so I'll make sure I wanted to repair it as best as I could. And Luffy's like, thank you so much. And so that was a good scene. That's still kept there from the manga. And the last scene is Nami goes in the ship, and she hid, like, a little, like, area underneath, like, one of the planks. So she moves the planks and sees some of the stuff she stashed down there, like her map book and her sextant and everything. And she pulls out a Den Mushi. It's a different kind of Den Mushi that we've seen. It's like a Bluetooth Den Mushi, which is fine. It's a little shell with a little tiny snail, and you put it in your ear, and then you dial. I think this is what's going to replace the baby Den Mushis in this. So you have the big Den Mushi like you see in Morgan's office and Garp using, like the big ones that can kind of call anywhere. And then you have the baby Den Mushi that have limited response, limited reception. They might get away with that limited reception thing. You could just call anywhere in the world just to make it easier. But these ones are simpler because then you can just take them, put them in your ear, and then there's like a little control pad, little dial pad where you can just you dial a number, and it's like, hi, it's Nami. You can tell him I have the map. Click, and then that's the end of the episode. Obviously, she's calling like Karubi or Chu or one of Arlong's men to let them know that she has the map to the Grand Line that Arlong wants. So I like that. I like the little mini Den Mushis. It makes it easier just to handle because I guess like the little baby Den Mushis. So the way the baby Den Mushis work in the manga is like they just kind of take them out and talk into them without dialing a number or anything. These make more sense because there's this little device that you have to like a rotary phone and you have to dial and then put it in your ear. You'll see Mihawk using one of these later in the series, and it makes sense just because like now you can keep your hands free. It's just like, hello there, yes, how are you doing? You know, it just makes it easier to communicate and everything. And it's like something like this would exist in the One Piece world. I can't imagine why it wouldn't. They even use something similar to this in Wano with the pond snails. They have like the little snails, like little sticks that they talk into. These are basically that, except they're like, instead of like holding them and talking into them like a microphone, you put them in your ear and you can kind of hear what people are saying in your ear through the snail, and then you talk and the person they can also hear you as well. So that's fine with me. Like, I think it's a very clever addition to the Den Mushi family, all right? So that's episode 2 of One Piece live action series. So from this point onward, we're going to have basically 2 episodes per story arc. You're going to have episode 3 and 4 be Syrup Village with Usopp, and you're going to have 5 and 6 be the Baratier with Sanji, and then 7 and 8 going to be Arlong Park with Nami and Arlong and everybody like that, Nochiko and everybody we're going to meet there. So I'm probably just going to do episode reviews in pairs, like 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. That's the way I'm going to do it. Going to be other videos as well talking about like the live action in more general cases, but that's the way the episode breakdowns are going to go. Yeah, a lot of stuff. Like, these 2 are probably, I think, a lot of people's favorites, just from the general reception that I've seen. Episode 3 and 4 does have a different pace. It does go a little slower. But to be honest with you, reading Syrup Village is an arc that it's not one of my favorites. It's okay, but like a lot of the East Blue arcs, I don't go back and like reread a lot, okay? I like the Baratier. I love Arlong Park. I don't reread Orange Town that much. I don't reread Syrup Village. You know, it's just they're different kind of arcs. They're a little slower in pace, even in the actual manga. The stakes aren't as high as yet from what we're accustomed with and everything. But yeah, it's a great introduction to Usopp's character in Kaya, so we'll see that, and Kuro is going to be there, so we'll see that next time. Thanks for watching, everybody. This will be Tekking signing out. Let me know how you felt about the episode down below and all that jazz. Make sure to go check out Artur's video on all the Easter eggs that, you know, are throughout the season. They're everywhere. They're really crazy, the level of detail they went on that, so I would highly recommend it. Yeah, that's the video. Later, everyone.